it's time to talk about some One Piece, because Chapter 1171 is here, brothers, and it is titled Ragnir. Dude, this is the first official chapter review of 2026, and it is mid-January. Man, you know how these New Year's are. We always get a lot of breaks in between. Hell, there's even a break after this chapter, but that's just how it goes. But nonetheless, we're back in action, boys. So, ripping off the band-aid, let's get right into it. We start off with a reader request in the cover. Nothing new. We've been dealing with these for quite some time now. And it's funny because I went back. I was like, okay, how much in between was there from the end of the Jammer cover page story to Yamato's start? Turns out there's about 40 chapters in between. The Jammer one stopped at around chapter 1078, and then Yamato started at 1109. So if we're using that metric, which is a pretty short time in between, then we still have around 20-ish chapters until we should get another canon cover page series. But who knows, you know? This is the final saga. Oda talked about how starting 2026, he wants to speed up the story more than ever. Maybe the next one is around the corner. Either way, I do think it is fun getting these reader requests because one, they're kind of goofy, they're kind of cute. And two, because I do think it's fun opening up each week's chapter, just wondering if we're going to get something actually canon. It's like opening up a loot box. Like, oh, is it here? Am I finally going to pull it? So now, getting into the chapter, but now that Harald has been defeated, the whole gang has gathered around the campfire, and they're sharing their thoughts after the battle. Scopper talks about how bleak the future would be if King Harald actually managed to escape this room. He was like, man, this guy just kept on regenerating. We couldn't stop him. It felt hopeless even during the battle. Shanks says, yeah, I cannot believe somebody actually came in and put him down. Jarl, did you know how strong this Elbaph devil fruit actually was? Jarl says, nope, I had no clue about the fruit at all. If anything, I'm just thankful right now that Loki actually showed up. And that is when Shanks has a little flashback of King Harald. It's a one-panel thing, but King Harald was so enthusiastic in that panel. It was so optimistic. He said, dude, when I join the Knights of God, Shanks, I will bring the new dawn to Elbaph. It'll be great for Elbaph. And of course, we know how that turned out. And on the opposite end, Shanks has a little flashback, one panel, of his father, Garling, the father of the year. And it's so funny seeing the stark contrast between Garling and how he treats underlings versus how Garling treats Shanks. I get it, right? He killed his wife, not exactly the best husband, not winning any medals. But as a father, he really cares about Shanks. I mean, going back to the King Harald flashback, dude, Garling introduced Shanks like he was his pride and joy. And then even here, Garling, with his hands wide out, mind you, to like a grown-ass kid, he says, Shanks, if you want anything, if you wish for anything, just name it. It will be yours. You've truly endured a miserable life, but now that has changed. Forget about everyone down below. They're scum, Shanks. They're not even human. Shanks is very perturbed by those words. Even though Garling meant nothing but the best, Shanks doesn't exactly like it because, of course, with those words, he's essentially looking down at people like King Harald and all of Elbaph. Shanks, of course, very empathetic here, grabs his arm in disgust, the arm that has the mark of the abyss. And it's kind of funny because this isn't the first time that Shanks has apparently done this. Scopper comes up, he pats Shanks on the head, pats him on the neck, and it says, Shanks, that's a bad habit of yours, man. You should never resent the circumstances of your birth. You have a bigger role to play, Shanks. Just hold on, brother. And it's sweet, you know, the Pirate King's crew, you can truly see that they really were Shanks' real family. And of course, this also extends to Buggy in a weird way, right? Because last chapter, they're like, oh yeah, you know, Buggy's like our brother, our other son. It's like, man, I cannot wait to see Buggy interact with people like Scopper and Rayleigh, or even Crocus, right? Because while Buggy is like this maniacal gesture on our end, in reality, when he's hanging out with the Pirate King's crew, I bet he is completely different, and I am looking forward to that. But yes, it is a good thing that Shanks does eventually get his arm lopped off by the Sea King, because now he doesn't have that nasty habit of, you know, grabbing his arm. I still wonder if he does, though. You know, because people who lose limbs Typically, they don't drop these habits right away. So I wonder if Shanks every now and then is like, ah, damn it. And then there's like nothing to grab. It just grabs his sleeve. I don't know, just random thoughts. But either way, Shanks is like, man, Harald was such a good guy. He was such a pure soul. Why did he have to die? If only I had been faster. And it's sad to see, right? Shanks is blaming himself for this, but in reality, I don't think anybody could have stopped King Harald. I mean, hell, Yarul, Saul, Ida, they all kind of talked about how, you know, Harald is kind of going too far, right? Like, hey, you're losing your warrior's pride, King Harald. But Harald, he tripled down, right? There was no going back for King Harald. So even if Shanks showed up and said, hey, King Harald, don't do this, don't become a knight of God, King Harald in reality still would have went through with all of this until the bitter end. So now we cut over to King Harald and Loki's lamenting his father's fate. And it's some tragic stuff. I think the panel was really well done. Just seeing Loki sobbing in front of his father's body. And of course, Loki took off his feathered cape and hid his dad's body, which makes sense considering what we saw last chapter. King Harald's body was literally being ripped asunder. Like, if the feathered cape wasn't there, we'd probably see Harald's head over there, his arm over here. He's missing like part of his torso. So yeah, Loki decides to cover up his old man. And he says, this sucks. Is this what happens when you love your country too much? So that is when we jump all the way over to Marie Geoise, and we see that Emu is also feeling the effects of King Harald's death. But he's not necessarily sad like Loki is. Instead, Emu seems exhausted, perhaps even pained. I'm not too sure how to categorize this, but Emu is reeling after King Harald's death. He says, man, Harald was a rare ancient giant. He was enhanced with extra power. He had an undying body. He was a monster. What the hell is an Elbaph? Who managed to kill this guy? Which is a very valid reaction. I mean, dude, he was clashing with Roxy Zabek. He did get stronger. He was immortal. Harald was a monster amongst giants. So I get why Emu is so perturbed here. It makes you wonder who just spawned in. And of course, the Gore say, they're like, hey, Emu, we can inspect the Abyss Circle. We can go to Elbaph, yada, yada. And Emu's like, nope, that is not necessary, y'all. If we send somebody over to Elbaph, they're gonna die. And we do not need more casualties. Every covenant comes with a price, even for Mu. And it's like, whoa, is this our first real hint as to how to take Emu down for good? Because going back to God Valley, dude, the top tiers of the verse came together, attacked Emu with Conqueror's Hockey, and Emu didn't even know anything happened. You know, Emu just tanked the ability, came back up, and then just Domi reversing rocks like it was another Tuesday. So, here we go. If you really want to bring Emu down, you seemingly have to take down bearers of the Abyss. But that's not an easy feat, right? These guys are immortal at the end of the day. King Harald is probably the first ever God Knight to actually die. So while this may seem like a small and easy task at first, it's actually quite a tall order. And I'm sure you guys have heard people say it, but this kind of is reminiscent of Harry Potter and Voldemort, where Voldemort has the Horocruxes which contain pieces of his soul. Voldemort, essentially immortal. The only real way to defeat him is to destroy pieces of his soul, the Horocruxes. It seems like that is what the God Knights are to Emu. Each of these God Knights have a piece of Emu's soul, and when they're defeated, Emu feels some sort of repercussion from that. It's not like Emu is in pain. He's not exactly like on his knees dying, but that's just one God Knight. Imagine what it would be like if you took down all 5 of the Gorosei and all the God Knights. Emu would probably not be having a great day after all that. And I do think that is what Oda is setting up. I think Oda is setting the stage for the Straw Hats, for the entire world, to kill those with the Covenant to Emu. And I think that's really fun. You know, thinking back to any big shonen anime, hell, thinking back to all of One Piece's battles, that's typically how fights go anyways, right? You beat all the subordinates, and then you end up with Luffy versus the big bad villain. Wano, we beat all the Beast Pirates, we beat Big Mom even, and then we fight Kaido. Alabasta, we beat all Baroque Works, and then we beat Crocodile. Enies Lobby, all at CP9, and then Rob Lucci. Oda, with this plot point, is essentially making this pattern necessary, which I think is awesome, right? Now, if Luffy's fighting Emu, Luffy's gonna have to be relying on everybody else who's fighting the God Knights. Like, oh, Zoro, please hurry up and beat Garling. Sanji, come on, hurry up and beat Jupiter, you know, something like that. I think that's a lot of fun. And then who knows what the effects will be on Emu after each and every pact is destroyed. Will Emu lose the black and shadowy effect? Will they become mortal again? We're not exactly too sure. Anything could be possible when it comes to destroying these God Knight covenants. And now, looking back at God Valley, it kind of draws emphasis on the God Knights. Like, oh, like, why didn't these guys participate more? Why didn't they fight more of the Rocks Pirates or more Roger Pirates? It could be that they were ordered to retreat. If the God Knights being defeated really do affect Emu, then I could see a reality where Emu was like, hey guys, leave the island. Because if you stay and if you die, I'm gonna feel that. Which would have been the way to beat Emu on that island, right? If Roger, Rox, and Garp went around beating the God Knights and killing them, Emu would have been affected. More so than all of them teaming up against Emu. So that's just fascinating to think about. And then even here in current Elbaph, would taking down / killing one God Knight send Emu back home? Like imagine, we kill Saint Sommers. We straight up rip his head off. He's dead in the dirt. How much would that death actually affect Emu? Would it be enough to send them back to the Holy Land? I wonder. I do wonder. And, you know, aside from just killing the God Knights, is there a way to just simply remove the mark? So far, we don't really know any instances of that. Minus Shanks, but Shanks didn't have the regeneration yet. So I'm assuming it's very different for God Knights. But we'll see. You know, I do really enjoy this plot point. I think it makes sense. And it gives a reason for us to run the gauntlet, you know? So now, getting back to the chapter, Emu just goes on and on about King Harald, about how he was an anomaly among his race. He was the only king that really wanted to work with the world government, the only king that would accept the covenant, and under normal circumstances, Emu wouldn't take Elbaph under his wing. You know, bringing them into the WG flippantly would be internal destruction for them. But King Harald was different. He was the one and only. It's a shame we lost him, but Emu says that this must be inevitable. History cannot be forgotten. Elbaph is of the D. Yeah. I don't think that's super shocking. I mean, of course, we have had giants with the D initial, Saul being a prime example. I wouldn't be shocked if during the Void Century, there were more D giants who sided with Joy Boy. So that explains why Emu, for all these years, hasn't really taken Elbaph under their wing. Emu has bad memories about this place. I guess the main question to ask right now is whether or not Loki and Hyrden are of the D clan, since they do hail from the royal family. I think it would make sense. Loki seems like a D clan candidate to me at least, because we did see that he has lived a pretty checkered life, and he is an enemy of God. So why not? Let's just give him the D clan initial, and if he doesn't have it, I guess Luffy could always just give him the D later, kind of like how he and Ace gave Sabo the D back when they were kids. Going on now, we see that Loki talks about how he doesn't want to tell Elbaph about King Harald's death, which is something we more or less saw coming the minute King Harald said, hey guys, tell Elbaph I'm a fool, tell him I was a loser, tell him I'm taking Elbaph the wrong direction. It's like, okay, nobody's gonna do that. I can't see Jarl wanting to do that. I can't see Loki wanting to do that. They don't want to besmirch King Harald's name. The guy's already dead. He already knows he's a fool. Why tell the rest of the world about it? So Loki instead says, I'm going to take the surviving soldiers of Aur's castle. Yes, they're surviving soldiers. Pretty crazy. You know, because when we first got here, Roto was like, yeah, by the way, Loki killed everybody. He was a monster. And it's like, damn, like, how were there surviving soldiers? Like, did the families not know? Did they know and they just kept it a secret? I don't know. You know, like, did we not do like a body count? What's up with that? But yes, Loki wants to take the soldiers and himself and wage war upon the WG. Jarl is like, hey, Loki, you know they're a big organization, right? Like, how are you going to do this? What are you going to do? Shanks and Gaban, they hit us with the dragon, ... and Loki simply walks off. So it's sad to see, but the flashback does end there. And the reason I say it's sad is because I am very curious to see what those 8 years were like until he was captured by Shanks. And of course, I want to see the Shanks interaction. What happened with that? And Loki, when he says he wants to attack the world government, what does he do? Does he go up to the Holy Land and attack them day in, day out? Does he fight kingdoms that are affiliated with the world government? Does he wait outside the red line for the God Knights to come down? I have no clue what the hell Loki was doing for the past 8 years. And then, of course, another thing I'm wondering about, but the surviving soldiers, what's up with them? Are they dead? Did they have to leave Elbaph so that, they wouldn't spill the beans about Loki and King Harald? We don't know. And then, of course, when it comes to Shanks, I am still under the assumption that Shanks simply beat Loki for his own good. Like, hey, Loki, if you can't beat me, you're not going to beat Shamrock, you're not going to beat Garling, you're not going to beat the Gorse, you're not going to beat Emu. I still think that is the correct course. So Shanks simply beat Loki for his own good, and then put him here in Elbaph so that Loki's powers would be used at a future date. It kind of reminds me of this chapter, right? Where Shanks was like, man, I hate this. I just want to do something. And then Gaban's like, hey, Shanks, everybody has a time. Maybe that is what Shanks told Loki. Like, hey, Loki, I understand you're mad, but your time's not here yet, brother. You need to be locked up in Elbaph for 6 years until Luffy frees you or something. So yeah, there's a lot of things which are still missing. And it's funny because it seems like Scopper was willing to explain a little bit more. We go back to present day, and Scopper's like, hey, Harald had a lot of dealings with the God Knights. There's some other stuff too. I can tell you about it if you want. But Hiradin's like, hey, Yasan, not now. We got to deal with what's happening in Elbaph. So I do think we will get more King Harald in a flashback. I do think we'll get more Shanks and Loki in a flashback. It's just that right now might not be the best time to spill the beans, right? Because Elbaph is currently under fire. Kids are being kidnapped. Emu is upstairs. Yeah, we do have bigger fish to fry. And Hiradin did give Loki a 3-minute timer, and those 3 minutes are unfortunately up. So now that Hiradin has the full picture of what went down that day, everything is just falling together. He's like, oh, that explains why Elder Jarl always opposed your execution. Loki, why didn't you say anything? And Loki's like, dude, how could I say anything? You guys already painted me as the patricide. And not just that, but why would I even want to say anything to besmirch our old man's name? I made no effort to correct the narrative. Hiradin apologizes, and he lets Loki go. He uncuffs him, and he recognizes that the world government has always been their enemy. And I'm excited for that. Because after this arc is over, I can easily see Elbaph swinging hard against the world government. And just thinking about the circumstance of Elbaph right now, Emu is taking a big risk. If Emu is not successful in their Elbaph subjugation, they just created a massive, literally massive enemy. Because up until this point, Elbaph has been pretty neutral with the world government. But now that Emu is trying to forcefully take them, now that the truth is out, yeah, Emu is kind of screwed if they don't win here. So, going back to Yasan for a second, but Scopper mentions something pretty interesting. He does say that he could divulge more information about King Harald and his dealings in the Holy Land. And he even says that the knights that are sent here have deep ties with Harald. And I do find that to be true. Because Harald was a knight of God. He was, God's steel for a multitude of years. The bond that King Harald has with Saint Sommers, with Shamrock, probably with Killingham even, it's not nothing. These God Knights do know King Harald. They've known him for a long time. They're probably good friends, which goes back to the whole line about how King Harald, yeah, let's visit his grave. They have nothing but decent memories with King Harald. So I cannot wait to see what their relationships with him actually were. Because King Harald, like I said, was great with the God Knights until that one very last day. And even then, Emu and the God Knights have no real clue what happened here. In their imagination, yeah, Harald blundered. He lost the fight. So Harald did go out on a good note with the God Knights. So I think that'd be kind of fun. Imagine we go up to the Sun Realm and Killingham is like, this is for King Harald. And then Sommers is like, I'm avenging my friend. I doubt they're going to say that, but, deep down, I like to imagine that they do respect Harald a good amount. And yeah, I think that's just hilarious, brother. And it's also interesting that Scopper knows the details. I'm assuming that's because of Shanks. Shanks told Scopper what King Harald in the Holy Land was actually like, how he was buddy-buddy with everybody, which I would enjoy that flashback, man. So, we see that the group that said they were going ahead 20 chapters ago are still here. We got Stanson, we got Rodo, we got Goldberg, Sanji, and Zoro within earshot of the flashback. I thought I was going crazy. I remember during the flashback, I was like, oh, dude, by the time we leave the flashback, Zoro and Sanji will probably be in their fights. They're probably going to be in the Sun Realm already. And then in the chapter, they're literally like 10 feet away. And I went back to the chapters. Okay, am I going crazy? Did I like misremember something? And I didn't. You know, I'm looking at the chapter right here. Hiruden says, hey, Stanson, I'm sorry. Go on ahead without me. Luffy says, Zoro, Sanji, I'll catch up in a little bit. And it's like, yo, what? I'm assuming the flashback was just that interesting that they didn't want to leave. And maybe they were like, hey, it's only 3 minutes, guys. I mean, you know, Hiruden gave him a time limit. Why not just stick around and, you know, hear what they have to say? I'm curious, too. What happened to the king? I thought that was kind of funny. You know, it didn't register with me until I read the chapter like 1 or 2 times. I was like, wait, Sanji and Zoro are still here? They're literally like right there. What's going on with that? I guess you could say that they spent 3 minutes preparing the lift. Maybe that's true. But if that's the case, then why even announce that they should go on ahead? You know what I mean? But yeah, getting back to the brass tacks, Hiruden frees Loki. His chains are off. And right when those chains come off, a Draugr falls from the Sun Realm. One of Killingham's massive nightmare monsters. Hiruden says, where did that thing come from? It's a Draugr. I didn't think those things existed. Loki looks at it. He starts laughing, saying, this will be a good warm-up. You guys go ahead. I'm just going to jump up to the Sun Realm. So in TCB, they say jump up, but in the earlier, you know, leaker versions, Loki said he'll fly up. Jump, fly, big difference there. But either way, the Sun Realm is very high up there. So if it's a jump, it is a massive jump, like a kangaroo jump or something. So that is interesting. I do think that is a hint towards Loki's powers, maybe. Like maybe whatever his Zoan Devil Fruit actually is, his mythical fruit, it actually has wings or something that makes it fly. But then again, we do have to, you know, remember that in the MCU at least, Thor uses his hammer to fly as well. So that could just be a Ragnir ability even. There's a lot of muddied water here, so to say, right? What is a Loki ability? What is a Ragnir ability? That is the big question when it comes to this jump dash fly. We then cut over to Scopper Gaban, and he talks about how he is worried for his son, and he wants to go up there ASAP. He wants to go see what's happening with Colin. So, to get up there a little bit quicker, Sanji ends up carrying Gaban, and Chopper tags along with him. And dude, what a combo! Sanji with his Roger Pirate parallel, I think is just a lot of fun. And of course, Sanji, if he's going towards Colin, that will put him in the crosshairs of Saint Sommers, which I think is perfect, right? A couple days ago, I did make a Sanji video, and I held a poll asking people, who did they think Sanji was going to fight here in Elbaph primarily? And Sommers was the #1 answer by a long shot. A lot of people believe that Sanji is going to fight Sommers. And now that Sanji is going towards Colin, yes, that is probably going to be the matchup here. And what's fun about this is that Scopper and Sommers have a lot of history. So just imagine Scopper coaching Sanji on how to beat Saint Sommers. Like, hey, Sanji, I fought this guy dozens of times in the past. I know exactly how to beat him. Just follow my instructions. And then even past that, we still have no idea what Scopper told Sanji in regards to his Conqueror's Hockey. Sanji ran up to Scopper and he said, hey, me, what about my Conqueror's Hockey? Scopper said something, Sanji reacted, and that was it. We did not hear the actual conversation. So with this tag team right here, we could get some more insight as to what's going on with Sanji's Conqueror's Hockey. Does he have it? Does he not have it? We're about to find out, brothers. So speaking of the Saint Sommers matchup, I am curious, but now that we see that Emu is affected by God Knights dying, what would Emu do if Sommers is losing a fight? What would Emu do if Killingham is losing a fight? would Emu step in and save them? Would Emu send them back home? Would he power them up some more to make sure they don't lose? Because now that we see that that is Emu's weakness, I wouldn't be shocked if they do step in. Like the Blackbeard Pirates, right? The Blackbeard Pirates all kind of work together. I think Emu might be running support for these guys. Like, hey, Saint Sommers, I'll back you up. Don't die on me, Sammy. Killingham, get stronger, bah, right? Obviously, if Emu were to do that, I think it would be a lot less silly than what I just portrayed there. But yeah, Emu running support for the God Knights, I think just makes a lot of sense. Because if they did end up dying, Emu would be affected. So he doesn't want that to happen at all. But then again, I think Emu could just simply snap them away. Like, oh, Sommers is losing? Okay, before Sanji kills him, let me just send him back home with the Abyss Circle. So, we see that Loki now goes on to fight the Draugr. And he says, let's get this, Ragnir. Let's show him your power. Ragnir ends up squeaking. And here we have it. Niflheim. Loki swings his hammer. And the entire Draugr, which is like, what, 10, 20 times the size of Loki? It freezes instantly. What? So when it comes to the ice powers, this seems like it is simply a Ragnir ability. I do not think that this is Loki, and that's simply because of the dialogue, right? Loki says, let's show him your power, Ragnir. So, the squirrel is the one freezing the Draugr. But now I'm wondering, the lightning. Does the lightning come from Loki, or again, is that another Ragnir ability? Not too sure. But I love the name, Niflheim. If you played God of War or know a little bit about Norse mythology, this is one of the 9 realms. It is the icy and frozen realm. And it's like, yo, if Oda goes with all the 9 realms as Loki's attacks, we could see a myriad of elemental abilities. So I pulled it up here on the side. Sorry, I'm not super well versed in Norse mythology, but the brass tacks, there's 9 realms. I'm going to mispronounce some things. I'm sorry in advance. So first up, we have Asgard, which is the one I'm sure everybody's really familiar with. That's where the gods typically live. Not too sure what attack that would equate to. Maybe that's the thunder attack, which would be pretty awesome. And then there's Aferheim. Should I even pronounce these? I don't know. We have the second realm. It's the light elf realm. And I could see this being a light base attack. And then, of course, we have the Wireland of Giants. And then we have Midgard, which I'm sure everybody is also familiar with. That is just humanity. And that is surrounded by ocean. Maybe that's a water-based attack. And then the next realm is the one ruled by Surtur, the fire giant. That could be a fire-based attack. And then we have the dark elf realm. And that could be a dark attack. And then, of course, we have Niflheim, which is the ice realm, which is the attack Loki used this chapter. Next, we have Helheim, which is the gloomy underworld, which could be a soul-based attack. And then the last one is Vanaheim, which is the magic realm, essentially. And I could easily see that being a magic-based attack. So yeah, what do you guys think about this? Is Niflheim the only one of the 9 realms that Loki will whip out as an attack? Or does he have all of the other realms as well, and they'll all come out as elemental attacks? Or is it just going to be regular attacks that have nothing really to do with the realms? Not too sure. But where there's one realm, I think there's going to be 8 more, personally. So yeah, some pretty cool stuff, brother. Of course, Oda is hiding Loki's abilities again. I think next chapter we might actually get that reveal. Now that the Draugr has been dealt with, Loki's going to go up to the Sun Realm. The lift has already taken off. I could easily see Oda whipping out Loki's flying ability. Like I said, could be Ragnir based, could be Loki based. We're not too sure yet. There's a lot of room to speculate, guys. But of course, that is where the chapter ends. There is a break next week, so we do have an entire week to soak in the chapter, digest it, and theorize about it. And of course, during that week, I'm going to be holding a lot of polls to gauge everyone's thoughts about Loki. So with that being said though, guys, thank you so much for watching this video all the way to the end. Pretty short video compared to the others, but that's just how it is. This is a pretty simple chapter, more or less. Let me know your thoughts and opinions and theories down below, because we will be coming back in the next couple of days to read through the comment section. So if you want your comment read, make sure to drop it down there. And yeah, that's it, you guys. Thank you so much for being here again. Appreciate it. Happy 2026. Hopefully it's been off to a good start. And I'll catch you brothers later. Peace out.